been talking about rise up men, and he told me that he wanted me to speak on pastors, men, as husbands and fathers, and as head of the household. And so I was sitting there thinking about that, and I shared it with my wife and said, this is what they want me to talk about, and this is what they want me to do, and visiting with her. Men, aren't your wives just great instruments of encouragement to you? And every Sunday my wife gives me feedback on my messages, and I always know that it's not a good day when she goes, well, I've heard better, things like that. And so I shared with her what I was going to do today, and so I went into the living room the other day, and she had her iPad out, and she was recording something. So what are you doing? She goes, well, I'm recording a rebuttal to your sermon as the wife's view, and I'm going to send it for him to play. So I broke her iPad, so she couldn't do that. But things aren't always as they appear to be, are they? I was telling a while ago, they're filming this, and I got this big screen behind me. I told them I wanted a green screen. That's the one that you can change what's in front of it. And I said, I want you to dub my voice in, and I want some tall, young, dark-headed guy. It's a picture up there, so that when you play it, that's what it'll look like. But it's very easy in our world, in our day and time, to make things to appear to be one way, and yet they're another way. When I first, several years ago, I went to First Baptist Raton, I told our senior adults that we were going to go to Branson on a senior adult trip, and they got all excited, and we loaded them all up, and I think we took like 26, 27 people that first trip, and we were in Branson. I'd never been in Branson before, and we were trying to find a place to eat, and there's all these senior adults everywhere, seems like millions of them, and every place was full, and we're driving down. I'm driving the church bus, and I drive by this place, and it says sandwich shop on the wall. And so I thought, hey, we can all eat a sandwich. And I whipped in there, and I pulled right up to the front door, opened the van. One of these, you could open the door, and they all filed out. And they all filed out and ran into this sandwich shop. And I pulled the bus over and parked it. And as I was trying to get out of the bus and lock it, they all come running back out. And they said, preacher, you made them laugh so hard in there, we just couldn't stand it. It was a bar. And they couldn't get over the First Baptist Church of Raton, New Mexico bus pulling up and unloading all their senior adults off at the bar. And I said, but it says sandwich shop. And they said, well, they said they'd serve us a sandwich if we wanted to stay. But they didn't think that would be a good idea. I went, oh, it's terrible. So a couple of years later, I took the same group to Bossier City, Louisiana for Lifeway Senior Adult Conference. We get down there, and they have an open-air shopping center down by the river, and they all want to go shopping. So I take the church bus again. We go down there. I pull in front of Bass Pro Shop and park. Tell them, go do all the shopping you want to do. I'll be right here when you're done. And it was lunchtime, and I said, just go eat anywhere you want to go eat. And so they took off down through there, and after about 45 minutes, an hour, I decided, you know what, I better go check on them, make sure everybody's okay. And so I go walking down this shopping area and run into one little man and 5 ladies, his wife and 4 other ladies. And they were standing there talking, and I said, well, did y'all find somewhere to eat? And they said, yeah, it was great. Said, it was good. And this one gentleman looked at me and goes, well, it was good, but it wasn't as good as the place back home. I said, what do you mean the place back home? He goes, well, there's another one at home like this, and food back home's better. I said, where in the world did you eat? And he said, right down there on the corner. I looked down at the corner, and it was Hooters. And I said, y'all ate at Hooters? I said, I would have loved to have seen those waitresses when that little old man and 5 little old ladies, all in their 70s and 80s, walked in. I said, what do you mean back home? He goes, well, Hooter Brown's truck stop's got pretty good food. And it's just wasn't quite the same. And I'm going, things can be a little bit deceiving, can they not? I'm going to read from y'all Ephesians chapter 5 and talk about, as husbands and fathers, head of the household, how if we're not careful, things can be deceiving, especially as pastors. It says in verse 25, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless.
So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourished and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church. Because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife, even as himself, and the wife must see to it she respects the husband. Now, guys, that is the ideal. That is what we strive for, to love our wives as ourselves, to cherish her, to love her, to present a vessel before God, and our responsibility. And I guess the question I'd want you to think about this morning for just a couple of minutes is the very idea of just how are we doing? How are we doing when it comes to being a husband and a father in our day-to-day life? Now, I'm reading a book. A gentleman brought me a book, one of our men in our church. It's called No Man Left Behind. And in the very first chapter of this book, it talks about a man named Brett. And it tells about his life, about how he started a company and he's working hard trying to get this company going, and everything's going good. But he's very busy and he's gone a lot. And his business got to the point where he had 6 different salesmen across the country. But he still had to do all the sales pitches for this company when they try to get new clients. And one day, a man called, one of the salesmen called and said, I've got a new agency, a government agency that wants to know about our program, and they want you to come, and you need to be here tomorrow. And it was down in Texas. And so he picks the phone up, and he calls his wife, and he said, hon, I hate to tell you, but I have to go to Texas tonight. And we got another agency that's looking at our at what we do as a company, and I have to go down there and talk to them about it. And his wife's response on the phone was, well, that's okay. We actually do better when you're not here. And he kind of laughed. In the book, it says he laughed and kind of joked about it. And while he's on his trip, he got to thinking about that. He's married and had a couple of kids. And he got to thinking, what does she mean we do better when you're not here? And so when he gets home, he sat down with his wife and he asked her, he said, what do you mean? Well, it's okay because we do better when you're not here. And she looked at him, she goes, well, hon, it's just a whole lot easier and a whole lot simpler when you're not here. Said, when you are here, you call and say, about 5:30, I'm on my way home and I get supper ready. And then you roll in here about 8:30 and everything's ruined, everything's cold. And I've tried to keep it warm for you. And we just never know when you're coming or going. And when you are here, the kids are always asking, why is Dad so grumpy? Why is Dad so agitated? And she goes, I understand this because you're working all of these hours. You're trying to get the business going. You're trying to do all of these things. She goes, but you know, when you're gone, things run pretty smooth. And the kids aren't worried about why is Dad in a bad mood or why won't Dad do anything with us. And I don't have to worry about when supper's going to be. It's just a whole lot simpler when you're not here. I read that story and I leaned back in my chair in my office and I got to thinking about that. I wonder how many pastors' wives or how many of just you as laymen, your wives, might at some point in your marriage, some point in your life said, you know, it's just easier when you're not here. Because I want to know as pastors, we can get real busy building a church. We can get real busy trying to build the kingdom. Because we think we got to do everything and be at everything and have our hands in everything and it's all about us. Amen? Ooh, that's a pretty muffled amen. That just means you're feeling guilty and you didn't want to say it outwardly. But guys, I want to tell you, I've seen people over, I'm not as young as I look. I'm old. But I've known a lot of pastors over the years that this has happened to them. I want to tell you about one. There was a young guy that was pastoring a small church. And church is growing, church is doing great, things are wonderful, everybody just thinks it's just a great day. And he had to do everything himself. It's a small church. And you know how pastors of small churches are. You're not just the pastor, you're the janitor, you have to mow the grass, you have to make the hospital visits, you have to do all the stuff. And yet every Sunday his wife showed up, the kids were there, everybody thought everything is wonderful and everything is great and everybody smiled. Y'all ever had Sundays like that where the wife and kids come in smiling, but you know in your heart they're not smiling. And but they're the pastor's family. And so they all show up and they all smile and they all do well. And this goes on for a few years until one day this young guy looked up and his wife was gone. She's gone. And this young guy sat there trying to figure out what in the world went wrong. Well, guys, what I believe went wrong is that young guy wasn't married to his wife. That young guy was married to the church. And he got all this passage mixed up. Instead of loving his wife as he loved himself, he loved ministry. He loved his church more than he loved his wife and his family. And I was sitting there thinking about that young guy when I read this story out of this book, when the wife says, well, that's okay because things just go a whole lot easier and a whole lot better when you're not here. Guys, we got to get our priorities straight. We got to get our priorities in order. Because if your ministry, and I'm not talking just pastors, you as laymen can be just as bad. If your job or your role in the church or you as pastors, your ministry, if it has a higher priority than your family, then you got problems coming. You got problems coming. Because our wives take on just as much of the junk as we do. You go home in a bad mood, you go home agitated, you come home 3-4 hours later than what you told them you were going to be, your wives are dealing with that. Your children are dealing with, when we come in and we're all worried about meetings at church, I tell you what, I have a perfect way how to get your church all riled up. Okay? In July, my wife and I went on vacation, and we came back from vacation, and we went by Lowe's, and we bought a for sale by owner sign, and we stuck it up in front of our house. I had more phone calls and more visits from church members than I have the 3 years I've been at that church. Hardly anybody would come by the house. And within 3 days, I think every church member in our church came by. They may not stop, but they drove by to see, is that sign really out there? Because it spread like wildfire. For sale by owner. I had a associate pastor from Central Baptist Church. We went to a ministerial alliance meeting. I pull up my park, and he's getting out of his car, and he walks up and he goes, Bruce, how you doing? I said, man, I'm doing good. What's up? And he goes, well, at our staff meeting last week, it was brought up that you got fired. I said, really? I said, I've been gone for a few days, but they didn't tell me they had a business meeting while I was gone. He goes, well, your house is up for sale. Yeah, my house is up for sale, but no, I didn't get fired. And good news, guys, we had a business meeting a week ago. I still didn't get fired, so we're good, all right? But perception's everything. And you get people riled up, and your wives are taking all this on. My wife was getting calls. My wife's getting a call going, where y'all going? She goes, what do you mean where we're going? We're going 5 miles east of town. Oh, you bought a house? No. We moved into our camper. Oh, that made it even worse. Sold his house. Guys, we put a for sale sign by owner up, and in 10 days had a sale, not only a sale, a cash sale. We had to move out in 3 weeks. And so we moved into our camper, and all these people are getting all excited. And my wife's sitting there going, what did we do? I said, we didn't do nothing. You're the one that brought this up. So, I mean, she did. We're on vacation. She goes, you know, you just preached a whole series of sermons on biblical financing and being out of debt. She goes, I think we ought to be good examples. I think we need to get out of debt. And I said, well, how are we going to do it? And she goes, I think we ought to sell the house. It's all her fault. But guys, they're carrying this load around. And when we come in agitated because things aren't good at church or stress is there, things are going, all of a sudden it piles up on our wives and on our children, and it affects them. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, you know, what in the world are we doing? And I sat there one day, and this all come up, and that's why when they called me and asked me to preach on this, I'm going, man, I'm struggling with this right now in my own family. And so I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I've been to marriage seminars, and we've had them at our churches over the years, and all the years I've pastored, and I got to thinking about all the things people had said, and I thought, you know what? It's time for me to start being the husband I ought to be. We had a deal on marriage here last year, and the guy talked about how that, guys, you have to put deposits in the bank of marriage. You do things for your wife. You do things that are special, things that, you know, and it doesn't have to be big things. And matter of fact, this guy doing the seminar said, listen, never, ever, ever, ever buy your wives a dozen roses. And I'm going, gee whiz, my wife loves roses. He goes, don't buy her a dozen, because in his term, he goes, that's one ding. Ding! He goes, but if you buy her one rose 12 times, that's 12 dings. All right, ding. Every time you do it, it's a ding. Doesn't matter if it's 12 or 1. He goes, buy her one 12 times. And I got to thinking, what have I done for my wife? And I got to praying about this and thinking about this. And I got to thinking back. My wife and I have been married nearly 28 years. And I got to thinking, when we dated, I did all kinds of crazy things. Now, everybody's not, I'm from Hobbs. That ought to say all that needs to be said, all right? So, I used to do crazy things. Now, I was 28 when Tina and I got married. And I lived in San Angelo, Texas. She lived in Hobbs, New Mexico. I would call her up and say, hey, I'm listening to a song on the radio. Made me think of you. Here, listen to it. And put it up to the radio. Now, I know that's stupid, but she loved it. Okay? And I got to thinking, what have I done for my wife? And I came up with this idea, you know what, guys? It's time I start dating my wife again. Instead of taking her for granted, instead of really just sitting there wondering, the stress that we're under, the things that happen in a pastor's home or in anybody's home, I got to thinking, you know what? My wife deserves to be dated, not just married. So I started doing things. I called her up the other day. I said, hey, want to go to the movies? She goes, well, I don't know. And I said, you know what? When we were dating, you never said no. She goes, that's right. And I said, I'm asking you out on a date. You want to go to the movies? She goes, I sure would. And we went out and went to the movies. And I started thinking about different things that I have done over the years. And it goes back to this word cherish. Do we really love and cherish our wives? Do we really care enough? I mean, guys, my wife is just like all y'all's, and I know there's some women here do not, it's on video, so I can say don't tell my wife, but anyway, don't ask me why, but when we get up in the mornings, it takes my wife an hour. Shower, clean up, put lotion on, pluck whatever she's plucking, it just takes a long time. Now, guys, I can be up and out of the house in 10 minutes. If I'm in a hurry, it's 8 minutes, all right? And I just get out of the way, I'm going, all right? But not with her. And the problem is, it took me a lot of years to come to the realization that that's okay, that it takes her an hour to get ready. You know why? Because she wants to look presentable. She wants to look good. And she wants to hear it from me. So now I'm going to blow this, because in the last month, 2 months, I've been going out of my way to make sure my wife knows how much I appreciate how she looks when we go places. Just to let her know I love her and I cherish her. And matter of fact, it got to the point where she's going, what is up with you? And I'm going, I'm just trying to love you and just trying to cherish you. And you have to tell them that. It kind of ruins the whole moment. But she was kidding, because for so long I didn't do this. For so long, she was my mate, and I loved her, but I really didn't cherish her. I did not let her know how much she means to me. Because to cherish means to hold dear, to feel and show love for, to take good care of, to protect, to cling to the feelings of. So my question again is, what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Do we really schedule time with our wives? I got a very young staff, and they came into my office the other day, and I have a big calendar on my wall. I'm still not high-tech enough, and I still have a year's calendar on the wall for 2014, and the first thing I've got written on there is my vacation days. And that's what I do the first time. Every time I put a calendar up and I start thinking about next year, I calendar my vacations. And they asked me about that. They said, wow, the first thing, that is your highest priority? I said, yes, it is, because that's my time with my wife. And if I don't get away from the church and away from town and spend, this is just me. You can do it, but just me. If I don't get out of town, I'm not off. I mean, I'm out of town right now. I'm in Albuquerque. I took a call last night after I got to the motel room and spent an hour on a phone with a senior adult lady that's trying to solve problems in my family. Okay? This morning, I'm standing right out here in the foyer while y'all are showing up, and she called back again today. I mean, she's a sweet lady. I wish I had 100 of them in my church, because she takes care of the little, she says, I take care of the little old ladies in this church. I'm going, you're the oldest one of them. But she takes care of the little ladies. But my oldest daughter had an issue. She's bruising real bad. She's bruises. She sits and crosses her legs. She'll have a big bruise. So the doctor told her about 3 weeks ago, the doctor said, well, I think it's one of two things. Either your kidneys are failing or you got leukemia. That'll brighten your day up, gentlemen. Get that phone call from your child. And so we're praying about it and we're thinking about it, and thank goodness it wasn't leukemia. Thank goodness it wasn't her kidneys. All those are fine. But now Miss Lillian is determined to figure out what's wrong with my daughter. So she keeps calling me up. I was reading on the internet, and I'm going, you're on the internet? You know, I'm in my motel room, can't get on the internet. And she's telling me all this. She's trying to, so guys, you can't get away. So I schedule my wife time. They call it vacation. That's my wife time. My wife and I spend time. It may be as simple as we take our camper, and man, it's easy now. I don't have to pack the camper no more. We just put the truck on and go because everything's in there. And we may not go 100 miles. But it's getaway time. It's my wife time. And we look forward to those times. And I schedule them through the year. It's not all at once. We do one week in the spring, 2 in the summer, and 1 in the fall. And we do that so that every so many months I have time with my wife for me to unwind and for my wife to know she's a priority. And I told these guys, the reason that's the first thing on the calendar is because my wife is the priority. Because this church will survive whether I'm the pastor or not, but my marriage won't survive if my wife's not the priority. Okay? Now I've got 5 children, and they're as weird can be. And I'm telling you, I love my kids. I actually had a lady come up and hug my neck the other day at church and said, you let your kids know I pray for them every day. I said, well, I appreciate that. And I said, but why do you pray for my kids? She goes, because the things you say about them, they need prayer. I'm going, oh, okay. I think she meant with a father like you, they need all the prayer they can get. And but I got 5 kids, and 4 of them are grown and married. 3 of them are favorites because they've got grandbabies for me, but they scattered to the 4 winds. I got a daughter in Dallas with 3 kids. I got a daughter in Connecticut with 2 kids. I got one in Florida that has 3 kids. Then I got a son that's married in Hobbs, has no kids yet. They have cats. And then I got one that I'm saying is not grown yet. And I don't know if you can ever grow up and be a boomer sooner. So anyway, he's going to OU. And he's in his 4th year of a 10-year degree at the rate he's going. And actually, he's got another 1.5 years after this. And thank goodness, hopefully, he will graduate. And but I consider him not grown yet. Because we have the father-son talks when the kids leave. Father-daughter talks. And this is the baby. There were 15 years between the oldest and youngest. I told you I'm from Hobbs. I'm not the brightest bulb in the bill. 15 years. There was so much difference between Amy and Bobby that when she was carrying Bobby, they'd think it was her baby. And my daughter would get mad. This is my little brother. And I'd say, keep telling them, honey, they'll believe you someday. But and it was also great too, because then when she got out of college and got married, she became the if something happens to me and Tina, she gets to raise the boy. That upped his prayer life a lot. He did not want to go to sisters. And so, but anyway, this boy, I had this talk with him. I said, son, whenever you go to college, we're moving you to Oklahoma. It's about 6.5 hours away. You remember to call your mama. Your mom, this is the baby. This is the last one. Said, you make sure you call mama on a regular basis. He's in his 4th year at OU. Every day. Not once a day. Thank goodness for cell phones and texting. I guarantee you 10 times a day he either calls or texts his mama. And I'm going, he's been gone for 3.5 years. And still 10 times a day. He took Dad serious. Dad said keep in touch. He's keeping in touch. Well, mama's having a lovely time letting go of the baby boy. Y'all ever drove from Clovis to Norman, Oklahoma one night and drive back the next day? We've done that 3 times in the last 4 weeks. It was for things that had to get done, but I just say it was a mother-son fix. She needed to see the boy, and so we load up and go. And I have people at church going, you are nuts. You know how hard that is on you? And I'm going, no. I can feel it. I'm not a young guy anymore. But I want to tell you, I know the opposite side of that coin. I know what it does to my wife if she wants to see her baby, and I say, I'm sorry, honey, the gas is too high. What's that say to my wife? That says to my wife, the son's not important, and it tells my wife that she and her feelings aren't that all important. I finally learned after several years of learning the hard way that, you know what? If it blesses my wife, I'm all for it. I was sitting in J.C. Penney's in a mall in Oklahoma City, holding her purse, sitting in a chair beside the dressing room. And this lady walks by and has to crack a joke. She goes, Bruce, or she know me. She said, sir, love your purse. I said, me too. Looks kind of nice. And she goes, and she actually worked for Penny. She goes, can I help you? I said, no, ma'am. I'm just sitting here enjoying my bass fishing. She looked at me like, I'm calling a security guard. She goes, excuse me? I said, I'm just enjoying my bass fishing. She goes, how's that? And I said, well, ma'am, I come shopping with my wife, and she agrees to go bass fishing with me. She loves fishing about as much as I love shopping. But she knows I like to do it. And so I just consider shopping as part of my bass fishing nowadays. Because it all fits together hand in hand. Because I've learned that my wife is a priority. And it's not all about what I like and what I want and how I want it. It's about cherishing and loving my family. Okay? And guys, we've got to begin to realize that if we don't, what's left out there is not good. It's not good. Sometimes we have to rearrange our work schedule. How many of us calendar all the church stuff first and then give our wife the leftovers? How many of us understand that dinner time is a priority? How many of us, I listened to a pastor here a couple of years ago that said, you know what? I told the church I'm leaving at 4 o'clock. From 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock is my family time. My kids come home from school. I have lunch. I have supper with my wife and kids. And after we're done with supper, if there's something that needs to be done at church, I'll be glad to do it. But from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, that is my family time, and nothing will interfere with my love of my family. When I first heard that statement, I thought, wow, that's pretty arrogant. And then I began to think about it and realized the man was saying, guys, I love ministry and I love the pastorate, but my family's here to stay. And I'm going to love my family. I'm going to be the head of the household. I'm going to be an example. And you'll be amazed what your children are picking up from you. I mean, I'm not the perfect parent by any means. But I've learned through my youngest boy that I have to be careful what I do in front of him because he mimics nearly everything I do, and he's 21 years old. We have a joke in our family, and I've told every church I pastor, I said, if you see Tina and I walking down the street and we're not holding hands, I've done something stupid, okay? Because we hold hands everywhere we go. We just always have. We just do. When we're walking down the street, if we're going through, we're going into church, we're walking down the hallway at church. And I have little old ladies going, we don't have affection, public displays of affection. I said, I'm holding her hand. At least I'm not kissing her. And the little lady goes, oh, do that. I want to see that. I'm going, no. But we hold hands everywhere we go. The other day, I had one of you ask me last night about my son. Does he have a girlfriend yet? Well, he had one, but not for long. Thank you, Lord. But we went to Oklahoma and we went out to eat with him and this little girl. It's been about a year ago. We get out of the car and Tina and I are walking holding hands. I turn around to say something and him and his little girl's holding hands. So after the little girl left and we were at our son's apartment, I asked him, I said, you hold hands everywhere you go? And he goes, well, you and Mom do. You and Mom do. Everywhere you go, Dad, all my life, you and Mama hold hands. And Dad, I just think if it's good enough for y'all, it ought to be a way that I tell a young lady I care about her. Be careful what you do in front of your kids. What are we teaching them? Are we teaching them they're second rate, they're second down the list, they're third down the list? I grew up with a bivocational dad that worked 6 days a week on a job and preached on Sundays and Wednesday nights and didn't have a lot of time. And I can count on my hand how many ball games my daddy ever watched me play in all the years of my life growing up. And I love my daddy. He went to be with the Lord in 2000, and I miss him dearly. But I tell you what, as a child growing up, I remember that there were only 5 baseball, football, track meets, everything I did. There were less than 5 in my entire life that my daddy ever showed up for. Where are your kids on the priority list? Where are they when it comes to being the father? Not just teaching them the things of God, not just teaching them what you say. How are we living out what we do? I want to read you, I found this little article, Top 7 Worst Ways to Spend Time with Your Kids. I love this. The number 7 worst way to spend time with your kids: serve as their human quarter machine at the video arcade. That is not quality family time, okay? Number 6, have the NBA game of the week on while you're playing Monopoly with them. What's that tell your children? That they're secondary. Number 5, read the paper while helping them with their homework. It's a real good way to spend time with your child. Go to the local high school football field and practice your short irons and have them collect all the golf balls when you're done. I thought that was a good idea, but that's not a good way to parent, okay? It's not a good way to parent. Suggest they take a nap with you on Sunday afternoon. I'm telling you. Isn't that a great way to spend time with your kids? At least you're in the same building with them. Drive them to Cub Scouts and read a magazine in the car while the den mother instructs them on how to tie knots. Quality time, guys. Here's a good one. The number 1 worst way to spend time with your kids: take them to your office and have them color while you work. That one hit home, guys. A lot of time in my ministry, when my kids were little, I'd be in the office working and they'd be in the floor playing. Quality. And people would say, you spend time with your kids? Sure do. Spend time all the time. They hang out with me all the time. Yeah, while I'm working, while I'm doing stuff I want to do. We finally started having game night at our house. And every week, the kids got to pick the game. We had one night, nothing happened on that night. We'd play games. And we had a war for years called Monopoly. Ongoing war. 5 kids I told you I have. The first 4 have never, ever, ever, ever defeated Dad in Monopoly. Dad's vicious, okay? I had that record well until my youngest boy turned 15. And we sat down one night and he said, I want to play Monopoly. And I'm going, okay, but don't cry when I beat you. And we went to playing, and the more we played, the more I started crying. And when we got done and that boy had beat me, he called every one of his siblings. I beat Dad! And every one of them said the same thing. Put Dad on the phone. They still talk about that night. They still. But you know what? We had fun. It wasn't a vicious thing. But we had fun because they knew the TV wasn't going to be on. We didn't have cell phones when my kids were little. But the phone didn't get answered. It went to the answering machine. Because this night is your night. Now, I want to close by telling, some of y'all know this. Most of y'all do not. I learned this the hard way. Because at the age of 26 years old, I'd been a bivocational pastor for, 7 years. Through college, out of college, was a bivocational pastor, working for a grocery company, pastoring small churches. And I'm that young guy I started out talking about. That I woke up one day and my wife was gone and my kids were gone. And I had a note laying on a table. And basically the note said, life is worth more than being second fiddle to God and ministry and to what you think is important. And my first wife ran off with the man I worked for because he would give her time. He cherished her and he took her from me. I spent 2 years without ever getting in a pulpit. Gave up on ministry. I'm done. I'm divorced. Can't do anything now. And we serve a loving God who one day I went to church where my dad was pastoring. And I sat down in this little bitty church in Hobbs called Cornerstone Mission. And my mama, bless her heart, said, Bruce, scoot over and let Tina sit down. And I scoot over and Tina sat down. I'd known Tina all of my life. Her mother and my mother were best friends all our life growing up. Tina's 4 years younger than I am. So at this point, she's in her early 20s. I'm in my mid to late 20s. And I scooted over and Tina sat down beside me in church, and I looked at Tina and I looked at my mama and I said, Tina grew up. Because I hadn't seen her for 10 years. She was 13, 14 years old last time I'd seen her. Mama goes, well, yeah, she grew up. And I looked at Tina, and I cannot tell you what my daddy preached that day, but I remember Tina sitting next to me. Tina and I started dating. Tina and I decided to get married. Almost 28 years ago. Tina and I said I do in front of a fireplace at her grandma's house with my dad doing the ceremony. And I looked at my wife 28 years ago. And I looked straight into her. And I said, I don't know what God has for us. I don't know what God's going to do in my life. I did not know that pastoring would ever be in my future again. And I looked at my wife at the altar with my dad standing there doing vows. And I said, I promise you right here, in front of my dad, your family, my family, and our God, I will not put you or our children second fiddle to ministry or to church ever in our lifetime. Ever. And guys, I'll tell you right now, if my wife walked into our house today and said, hon, I can't handle this anymore, I'm done. I can't be a pastor's wife. I'd be back in the grocery business tomorrow. Because if I can't honor my wife, if I cannot be the head of the household, what good is a ministry that I'm trying to head and I'm trying to do? So when I was called, asked to do this message, I sat there and thought, me? I sacrificed a family. Now my 3 daughters and I get along better now than we've ever in our life. We talk regularly, we love each other, we care about each other. But I tell you what, I made it rough on those girls. My oldest one always lived with me, but my youngest 2 daughters didn't growing up. They spent 2 months of summer with me and every holiday with me. But I was a distant dad to them. All because they weren't the priority. My church was the priority. Those first 2 churches I pastored got all of my time, got all the priority time. They got everything. And my family got the leftovers. Gentlemen, never, ever, ever put your ministry in front of your family, because that is not honoring God.